Chapter 7. The timing was too close. Wolf hung from the narrow branch and grimaced in pain as the sharp spikes of the rough bark ripped his hands. The pig was beneath him, fraught and confused. It lunged at his dangling legs, and Wolf felt the bristles along its back scrape as he yanked his legs up higher. The tree was spindly, and Wolf couldn't get high enough to be safe. The muddled pig kept ramming the trunk as if he couldn't get past, and it was a terrifying sight to look down on. Wolf wrapped his legs around the spiky trunk and hung on. Sweat drenched his body as he thought about the consequences of falling from his perch. The pig backed up and started to run down the path, but Tag was right there in front of him. "Get him, Tag! Get him, Tag! Get him, Tag!" Jem was stuck in a sound groove. He changed occasionally to "Get up, Ralph." The action was still around the base of Wolf's tree, and it was terrifying yet fascinating to watch Tag work the battle. He nipped in and out, repeating the bail-up, waiting for Ralph. At last Ralph stood up, staggered a bit, and ran to support Tag. His breathing and barking were laboured, as if his windpipe was damaged. "Hold him, Ralph." Jem came running up close to Wolf's tree and managed to lean in it and shove Wolf's leg up a bit. "Stay there, don't breathe." "That's it, Tag, that's it, Tag." Tag was doing his job of nipping and worrying the pig, but he needed Ralph to hold the snout. The pig kept up the subhuman sound, winding the dogs up and scaring the hell out of Wolf. It would have been the best seat in the house to view the action if Wolf's hold hadn't been so precarious. He clung to the branch and his legs ached to straighten out. Even worse, though, was the smell. The pig stunk. It was the strongest, most disgusting thing Wolf had ever smelt, and it surrounded the fight below him and wafted straight up his nose. Ralph was back at the scene, keeping to the pig's side, while Tag nipped and covered where he could reach. Jem stayed behind with his knife. "That's it, get in there and hold on, for Christ's sakes, you stupid dog, Ralph." Ralph couldn't get near the snout. The pig was swinging his head, charging, and trying to get low to drag his tusks up, any flesh he could reach. Then it swung towards Ralph, and Tag leapt in and got a hold on the pig's cheek. "Yeah, Tag, get him, hold on," Wolf yelled from the tree. The pig turned abruptly to face Tag, and it gave Ralph the chance he needed. He darted in low and grabbed the pig's balls. It shrieked its anger and spun to face the latest assault. Tag hung on, but got swept around with the pig as it lunged at Ralph. Wolf saw the tusk sink into Ralph's hind leg. He whined and growled, but didn't let go his grip on the pig. Jem stepped up behind the pig, reached in and grabbed the boar's thrashing hind leg. He flipped the beast over and exposed its pale underbelly in one fluid movement. Ralph was thrown off and landed with a howl behind Wolf. The pig squealed and worked its legs. His massive head rolled from side to side, his terrified eyes searching wildly for an escape. Wolf was able to look straight into his open mouth, his big tongue and teeth, and the tusks that had just wounded Ralph. Tag was still hanging onto the pig's cheek when Jem drove the knife in and down, hard into its heart. The pig's legs worked for what seemed ages before he was still. It was sickening, but exhilarating, and Wolf heard himself shouting, "You've got him. Yeah, Jem, he's dead." "He's dead, all right. Let him go, Tag." Tag kept on shaking the pig's cheek, and Jem shouted, "Let go, Tag." Jem's hand shook as he stepped back and wiped the knife on his trousers. "Big enough for you?" He was breathing hard. Tag released the pig's cheek, but couldn't resist sneaking back in to tug at the pig's ear, nearly ripping it off. "Let him go," Jem roared. Tag let go with reluctance. He circled the prize before slinking off to join Ralph, who had crawled under a low rock. "You coming down from there?" Jem grinned up at Wolf. Wolf could hardly move his arms to climb down. They were numb and yet shaking. Jim gave him a hand down and patted him on the back, as if Wolf was the one who'd killed it. They shook hands and laughed with excitement. Wolf's heart was pumping at a crazy rate. Jim leaned over and ran his hand over the puncture hole above the pig's heart. He stood up and smeared his bloodied fingers down the side of Wolf's face. Well done. First hunt, first boar, first blood. I didn't do anything. I was hiding up the tree. If you hadn't moved that fast, we'd be carting you out on a stretcher. You had to bolt up there and you couldn't get down until he ran or died. Do I have to tell everyone I was up the tree when you stuck him? He imagined Davy reenacting his tree cling from the top bunk for years. Now, what happens on tour and all that? A team effort, wasn't it, boys? Jim looked around for the dogs and said, "Oh, hell, Ralph." Ralph was lying on his side with his head up and twisted as he implored Jim for help. Wolf let out an involuntary cry of dismay at the sight of Ralph's black eyes begging for help. He started to rush over, but Jim slowed him. "Don't move fast. He'll be unpredictable if he's injured." Jim moved towards him, keeping up a reassuring patter of soothing words as he went. Ralph never took his eyes off Jim's face, and Wolf wished he had a dog that adored and trusted him like that. "Oh, Ralphie." Jim knelt down and ran his hands down Ralph's back and over each leg. Blood was pooling between Ralph's back legs and around his stomach, and he gave a low growl when Jim carefully lifted the top leg up to have a look. "Come on now, Ralph. You know I won't hurt you. Let me check the damage." He spoke low and softly to Ralph as he found the gored flesh and assessed the damage. "How bad is it?" "It's deep and floppy. Could be a tendon." Jim sat back and looked at Ralph and then around behind him at the pig. He dropped his head and rubbed the back of his neck. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to be busy for a while. I'll clean Ralph's wound and sew it up as best I can, but I'll need your help. Ralph needs water too, which is in the bag up the track." Wolf nodded and said, "Yep, sure." But he was thinking, "No, please." "Then we need to gut old Boris here." "Gut him?" "Yes, messy but necessary. The day's warming up and we don't want him to go off." Jim stood up and rubbed his knee as he thought aloud. "I'll move Ralph out of the way before we gut the pig so we don't have cross-infection issues." And then, but really, Wolf knew. "Then we get walking. Don't think about that now. We need the packs from back up the trail. Can you?" "Yeah, sure." Wolf set off to get the bags. Jesus, one dirty boar, an injured dog, 2 bags, and we're in the bottom of a gully. What the hell?